management and financial aid here at Flint Hill. And we also have Dawn Hopke here joining us from the admission team as well. We have quite the event planned for you. It is going to be fun and informative. To tell you a little bit about it, first we'll hear from our headmaster, John Thomas, and then we'll receive a quick presentation from our Director of Studies, Emily Sanderson. And of course, that presentation is all about curiosity. After that, we'll head into the part of the event that will be the bulk of the event this evening, and that is the panel discussion. That will be led by Meredith Van Dyne, our assistant head of School for Institutional Advancement. And we have a dynamite panel of several of our team members here, very knowledgeable team members here at Flint Hill to answer your incredibly thoughtful, curious questions. And then at the very end, I'll come back and tell you some quick next steps. So some other opportunities to learn more about Flint Hill or to apply or complete your application for those of you that have already started to Flint Hill. So I am very excited for you to meet all of my colleagues. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our headmaster of 17 years, John Thomas. John, I think you're muted.
I bet you were curious why you couldn't hear me. I bet because I was curious why I couldn't get through. But I apologize for that. And that's part of what this is all about. That curiosity is part of the joy of learning, of being with other people, of constantly looking down the road, thinking about why was that guy mute? Why can't he figure out to hit the mute button? You know, trying to figure out what if, those kinds of things. Well, we do that with our kids from the youngest ages all the way through. And part of the beauty of tonight, looking at the list of people who had registered, we have this wonderful range from our lower school, our middle school, and our upper school. And part of the beauty of Flint Hill is we're 3 divisions on 2 campuses, but we're one school. And one of the great through lines of our school is this idea of curiosity and how that leads to innovation, how we make sure that everything we do is very intentional, deliberate, strategic, safe in today's world. And some of that curiosity is built into all of that because we are constantly trying to figure out the answers to different things and then trying to apply that to everyday life or to what we're learning or what we could learn. Because all of us know the more we learn about whatever maybe our field is or whatever, the more questions we have. And then the more we learn about that, then that just begins to broaden it even more. And that's really what tonight's about, because education is like that. Just like you clicked in tonight, partly because you may have been intrigued by a program on curiosity. What in the world is that? You were curious to see what are they going to say? Or how many people are going to be on that call? I can't imagine other people, being up at 8 o'clock at night and suddenly wanting to talk about curiosity at a school or whatever. All of that is part of the beauty of learning, of being together with like-minded people who are kind of intrigued by the idea of curiosity, trying to figure out what can we do? Well, just imagine that's what we do here at Flint Hill with our children, with our teachers, with everything we do, because learning here is very dynamic. It is a sense of momentum. It is constantly engaging. It's active. It's participatory. And isn't that really what education is meant to be? It isn't meant to be sitting in a square brown desk and looking at a room or just memorizing facts and then regurgitating it back to teachers. It is actively engaging with classmates, with great mentor teachers about what can we learn from this, and then what new questions, what new adventures will that knowledge lead us to? And I think you're going to get a bit of that tonight. As Jennifer mentioned, the cast of folks that you're going to meet tonight and a chance to listen and ask questions. And you've asked a bunch of questions. I've seen some of the questions people submitted already. They were phenomenal. They were great. I loved them. Because the idea would be, I'd love to sit for hours and talk about some of that. Because when we really get into learning, it becomes passionate. It becomes something that really gets you on the edge of your seat, really wants you to, ask more questions and engage. And that's what we try and do with our children. And so tonight we want to give you a kind of a sample of that, to give you some sense of what school is like right here. Rather than just talk to you about our features and what we do in different programs, let's get right into one of the core values of learning about the world and doing it that way. And the person I'm going to turn it over to kind of help kick it off now is going to be Emily Sanderson. Emily and I started here 17 years ago. We were in a great cohort of people who came in that year. Emily's been a department chair, a teacher. She's our director of studies. She's one of the people who led us into design thinking years ago, really getting us to think not just sometimes outside of the box as we talk about education. Sometimes we didn't have a box. Sometimes the idea was just to figure out how are we going to do this and what will make it better. Because I will tell you, one of the guiding principles we have at Flint Hill is everything we do comes down to what's in the best interest of our students. This is the most student-driven school I've ever been in my entire career, and it is all about getting them fully engaged in their learning. And as parents and as teachers, I hope we follow the vision we actually set for the kids, and one that Emily practices, I know, on almost a minute-to-minute basis, is take meaningful risks, be yourself, and make a difference. And that is something we talk to the kids about. As faculty, we talk to each other about. And so part of tonight is taking that meaningful risk to talk about curiosity and that whole sense of learning. And we're going to be ourselves because we're all just trying to learn how can we help these great children in Fairfax County learn at an even higher level, because ultimately we want them all to make a difference. And so as partners, home and school, that's one of the ways we can do that. So Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you and I will stop.
Thanks, John. And hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you a little bit. And I'm going to segue a little bit from what John talked about, just to frame this, in that about 8 to 9 years ago, we were really looking at what do students need for the next century, right? Way back in like early 2007, 2008, things like that. And that connection to that citizens, people would need to know how to learn, and that the skills around innovation and questioning and making connections were going to be paramount, right? In those ways that we don't really know what jobs of 25 years in the future will be, right? And that as you do some futures thinking, which is something we often practice at Flint Hill and read a lot about, our children will have multiple careers, not even just multiple jobs, but multiple careers, and careers that probably haven't really even been invented. So at Flint Hill, we are really curious, just as a general group of educators and administrators and school leaders. And so we started doing some research. So I'm going to present a little bit about our approach to this, around how we have explored neuroscience and how we bring that to the educational journey. I've got a couple of stories for you so you can get a little bit of a visual of what this looks like. And then we'll talk a little bit about the how. You guys have submitted fantastic questions. So I've tried to weave some of that into the presentation so that you feel like you've got some of your questions answered, and then it might even fire 1 or 2 more new questions, which I love. So bring the questions, because that's the really important part about learning. And all of us on the panel, we hope we learn things from you tonight. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. I'm going to present just a couple of slides. And if somebody can tell me that, yes, you can see that.
We can
see it.
Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification on that. All right, so the first part I'm going to start with is something that grounds all of our work in our community, and that is really understanding the neuroscience behind learning. And so several years ago, we were fortunate enough to go to a conference of really big K through 12 schools across the country. And we were introduced to the research of Dr. Imardino Yang, who's a neuroscientist from USC at Santa Barbara. And she has worked on a number of national level committees to study how people learn. Most recently, she worked with the NGSS on producing some literature. So, she really is well known in this area. And part of her research that I found really curious about 6 or 7 years ago is how she studied parts of the brain and the parts of the brain that were connected with deep learning. Because if you've looked at some of our materials, or you've probably heard a little bit about our portrait of the student, we really want, and our program and academics are all centered around creating self-directed learners. So like, oh, this is great. This is some neuroscience that connects with what will help us and guide us in this creation of academic and programmatic experiences for students to really bring that adaptable, curious, resilient skills to their learning journey. And what she finds is that it's the parts of the brain that are connected to emotions that are connected the most with deep learning, which is really interesting, right? Like just that affective, those emotions. And so here I put like emojis and things like that. That connection of emotions promoting deep learning was really kind of like, wow, like an aha moment for us. Like, how can we dial up those positive emotions? What are the things that really fuel those positive emotions with students at every different grade level? And how can we pull some of that together? And so that has been an area that's that we've done training with our teachers. So teachers, our teachers are always on this sort of continuous learning journey to find out more about how does the brain work, how do students learn. Something that we're all really curious about right now is that connection around social emotional learning, as we've all gone through historic times, and what are things that we need as groups and as individuals to help us to continue to thrive. So this emotional part, which sometimes might seem sort of counterintuitive in terms of learning, it turns out it's extremely important. So sort of the next slide that I want to share a little bit, like several people asked in the questions, gosh, how do you guys do this? What's the ratio of academics to projects to traditional? You had all sorts of really great questions in this. So the core ideas here are about passion, purpose, and choice. And when you put those things all together, how do those three things really work together to support these self-directed learners, our effective communicators, our ethical citizens? So a couple of really fun stories here. So imagine you're taking a walk with your lower school students and you find a piece of trash. And fast forward 6 weeks later, your lower school students in your class are hosting a bicycle drive where families are bringing used bicycles to donate to an international organization that then ships the bicycles across the world to help people in need, where having a bicycle really changes their life just as a mode of transportation. From this piece of trash found in the watershed near Oakmore Park, which is a park that is adjacent to campus, all the way to, there's so many stops along this journey, which are just fabulous, that going to the recycling center and just noticing the bike on the side and then asking the question about bicycles, and then the whole elementary school class going to the upper school and presenting, and having one or two of those students who are actually pretty shy speak really in a public setting in front of 500 upper school students for the first time, and then creating materials to engage the whole community to donate these bicycles. All of this is like a lower school student's journey. Or imagine in grade 4 or 5 that you're creating a website about something that you're studying in social studies. So bringing that social studies and our computer science background and our effective communication and finding a way to share that. That's that purpose part, right? Bringing some choice. You have a lot of different things you can present. The purpose to sharing a website to educate others. And often that's a great way for different students to be able to exercise elements of their passion. And then this last one is just a really fascinating story. In our post-AP multivariable class, so in our math classes, we have a project where students towards the end of the first semester are taking the equations and the material that they've learned and applying it to visualization. And one of my favorite stories is of a student who really wanted to understand the shape and the mathematical formulas to explain the shape of a raindrop. And she did all this research. We had a bank of databases where students can access a scholarship around this, and she couldn't find anything. And she went to her teacher, and this was an area where she pulled science together and her knowledge of science and water tension and molecules and the mathematics, and did what at that time was some original research around the shape and the varying shapes of raindrops. And so I just love that. There were a couple of questions about differentiation and how do you as a community make sure that each student is challenged. So that example of the raindrops is a great example of, really taking it to the next level. This is where having really a benefit of having a community of inventive, innovative, entrepreneurial teachers who also really spend a lot of time getting to know students and having enough choice in a project so that you can really direct people and say, this is an area where I want you to really stretch yourself, or, here's a project that would work really well with something that you're interested in. I think this student was really into art and music. And so they, being able to match that up really unlocks for students that sort of passion, purpose, and choice as a kind of gateway into creating a safe place, a place of belonging, and a place where they can take a risk. And then lastly, kind of like, hey, gosh, how do you guys do this? Some of our fundamentals of this are that our curriculum is really based on skills. And so when you have the foundation of skills, the content, which is also really important in something like multivariable, you have to have like all of that mathematical content to be able to unlock that project. Having a strong foundation in skill gives you flexibility in content, which then gives you the ability to have more choice, to bring in student passion, to find different elements of purpose for their learning. We honor questions. That's probably the most important thing, parents, that I would say to you, that every time your child asks a question, if you can say, that's a great question. We want our students to never feel like they can't ask a question and to always be engaged. So if you could just do that for me, say, gosh, that's a great question, and then try to answer it. That is probably one of the most important things. We have classes where the final exam is to write the questions, not to write the answers, but to write the questions. We create safe places with a sense of belonging. We're always striving for authentic work. For instance, in grade 6 this week, the sixth graders have been reading books, and their assignment is to write a letter to the authors and see if the authors will answer them back. And certainly purposeful, and then tied back to that neuroscience, is the emotional connection, that positive emotional connection to really engage the students, because we want deep learning at Flint Hill. So that is a quick presentation, and I look forward to lots of good questions from you guys, and hopefully some questions on the fly, because maybe you learned something and you have something else to add. So I think it's now time to turn it over to Meredith Van Dyne, who's going to manage our panel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily. It's great to be with you all tonight. Welcome again to Flint Hill and this really creative and interesting event. And boy, is John Thomas right. As we look through your incredible range of questions, you are Flint Hill families. Boy, as we look through your list, you are curious about a lot. And we noticed two threads. One, there was a group of questions that were really, you were curious about curiosity. And then there are a whole thread of questions where you're curious about specific things. So depending which group you were in, or maybe you were in both, we'll try to do a good job for you tonight of really sort of not necessarily ping-ponging and going back and forth, but we'll cover both kinds of questions so that hopefully we meet your needs over the course of our time together. Now, my Flint Hill panelists, I know you love to get into these topics, but we're going to be helpful and make sure we are, as I call on you for a question, the first time I do that, please be helpful, introduce yourself, and share what your role is at the school so that our parent friends can have some context for the perspective you're coming from. So I know you like to jump into things, but just pause the first time so that you're almost ready. And I'm going to catch some of you off guard because it's more fun and it's more like every day at Flint Hill. James, Vicki, and Emily, you probably have something on this too, knowing you. One parent or group of parents were curious about the following. Could you discuss the evolution of our STEAM offerings, including sort of what's the progression through our lower school grades? And a really important topic, as we're all seeing the news and the coverage right now, how does Flint Hill find, train, and retain our incredible teaching talent? And then part 3, which I will remind you of if you don't remember, is how do our teachers at Flint Hill collaborate with other teachers inside the school or outside the school to generate what we view as best practices? So I know there's an online arms race right now between Vicki and James to jump in. So I'm going to go to James first by an alphabetical order.
Hi, everybody. My name is James Van House, and I'm the Director of Fine Arts at Flint Hill, and I'll try to tackle some of that. I love the idea of STEAM versus STEM, because I think STEM is a wonderful thing, but STEAM integrates the arts into that. And for those of you, if anyone who's met me before knows that my favorite phrase is the future of the arts at Flint Hill is the integration of innovation and fine arts in a completely student-led approach.
And James, may I pause? If we haven't met you, what's your role at Flint Hill?
The Director of Fine Arts. So starting in JK, students have music classes and art classes that are separate from their main homeroom classes. But what I'm amazed at is how integrated the arts are into every facet of lower school life. There are classes that put on short plays or write their own scripts or do their own theatrical presentations and write their own music and draw their own pictures that are associated with the books they're reading and things that they're doing. So that STEAM versus STEM approach starts very early, where we're getting really integrated into all of the disciplines. And what amazes me about that is the opportunities just keep going. As you get older, you get to branch out into different fields in music. And as you get into middle school, you have choices in theater and visual arts that include digital. And that's where you start to see things come together. In the upper school, our digital arts program has a lot of overlap with our innovation program. And you'll see graphic design 2 students that are production. And the programming that goes into our robotics helps the remote control mouse that scurries across the stage in our production of the Nutcracker. You just start to see more and more opportunities for all of the technology and innovation that we do blending with the arts. So Vicki, could you tell us more about STEAM and STEM and how that progresses through the grades?
Absolutely. I am Vicki Knickerbocker, the upper school or 7th through 12th grade innovation chair. And much of what the innovation department kind of the umbrella falls into that kind of STEM or STEAM category. And I love the term STEAM also because I feel like technology has to have that artistic influence in order for there to be innovation. So it's definitely a part of the program. When we start off at Flint Hill in our lower school, there is a computer science and innovations going from JK through third grade. And what happens there is they have these computer science classes, but innovation, the class itself, is actually integrated into the curriculum. So right off the bat, they're using it as a place to bring their questions to and answer them through projects. So the innovation teacher is working with the core curriculum teachers, bringing projects that could range anywhere from coding projects to 3D printing projects, or even not even what you might call a tech project. They might be using pipe cleaners and glue and glitter and paper, but what they're doing is they're looking at a subject, asking questions, and coming up with solutions as part of the curriculum. So that might be 3D printing bubble wands to study surface tension, or using 3D design to write out their names if they're, learning their names. It could go anywhere into that. But where that A comes in with STEAM, when you're talking about technology type of classes, is that imagination and how they approach the problem and bring in that creativity, that critical thinking, that problem solving. So when they go into fourth and starting from fourth grade, innovation becomes a class of its own where they actually attend. And they're going to be doing projects, again, integrated or that complement core curriculum. So things like if they're studying civilizations and social studies, they might be creating those civilizations in an application. When they move up into the middle school, they can start branching out. And here's another thing that I love, and it ties into STEAM. There's this maker type of approach to innovation classes, so much so that in the middle school, there is a maker class where students can do everything from woodworking to textiles to electronics to fabrication to 3D printing to creating stickers for their laptops. But they are thinking of this on their own. So the teacher isn't saying, oh, today we're going to learn how to 3D print. The teacher is saying, what are your interests? What do you want to do with it? What would you like to make? How shall we make it? Here are the tools to make it. And also, how can we use all of these things that we're talking about to give back to our community? And I know that was a question that popped up somewhere too. But it's that imagination and curiosity and artistic element that we bring into these classes. So back to what we're doing with the STEM, we've got robotics and we have programming, and in each of those you're going to see project-driven curriculum where students are really asked to solve a problem, think it through, go through a design process to come to the end of it and understand as much by going through the process as they are coming up with just a solution. When they hit the high school, things get deep and they get more complicated and they get more fun and more challenging. And students can continue along a path, whether they're interested in programming or robotics, but they can still discover things, whether it's engineering or there's some independent projects, and I don't want to go on and on. If you have specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But injected into all of these levels are an opportunity for students to explore. And to me, that's what the A is all about in STEM and STEAM.
Thank you, Vicki. That's terrific. As our director of studies, one of the things Emily does is work really closely with all of our academic department chairs. So Emily, I wondered if you could talk about that question a parent had wondering, could you expand on how do our teachers collaborate with each other, both on campus and then some professional development off campus to understand and develop on our own best practices?
Yes, great, thanks. So, one of the things that we talk about actually in the hiring process, and that's very much part of our faculty and staff culture, is this idea of true collaboration, bringing people together people who are really rock stars in their own right, kind of like their own like experts, national level experts in different elements of instructional design or social emotional learning, and coming together and kind of working together as a group where you have to kind of give up a little bit of your rock starness to join this band and then make even sort of better music together. That's kind of my metaphor for what we do. So, so this looks like a number of different ways. One of the things that we've found that's probably the most effective for building this cross-divisional, really strong faculty and staff culture is when we take a topic and do some exploration around it. We call it design teams. That sort of goes back to, John mentioned design thinking, and that's something that we started about 7 or 8 years ago, following some a way of thinking about human-centered design that came out of Stanford University and a group called IDEO, where you really study a problem, find some tension points, really figure out what the nugget of the problem is, and then iterate and test it and then refine it. And so it's sort of this rapid fire prototype, test, refine, to kind of really figure out a way to like go back to this human-centered problem. And our faculty have really appreciated this and really loved these opportunities to connect with amazing educators across all the divisions, to kind of sometimes just go explore and be curious on their own with this small group of people, kind of finding out, doing this training or finding this book and reading it together several years ago in the lower school, as a way to be. We were wondering how to make the critical thinking of our lower school students more visible to families and to sort of the broader community. We did a deep dive on Project Zero from Harvard and attended trainings. Jessica might talk a little bit in the future of this meeting about her work. She's one of the faculty of this summer institute that works with all sorts of schools around the DC area connected with Project Zero in Harvard. So, you know, it's those kind of elements of finding great programs, bringing it back, and then sharing it in the community that creates this really thriving faculty staff culture. Did that get all the questions, Meredith?
It got all of that series of questions,
Okay.
Emily. Good news.
Right.
There are many, many more from this amazing group.
Great.
Howard and Michelle, I'm headed your way shortly, so you can find that unmute button momentarily. So we know that at Flint Hill, not all the learning happens within the academic classes, of course. So this parent was curious to learn more about, are there activities beyond the regular school day or outside of the classroom, activities, clubs, etc., that really foster and encourage creativity beyond the regular academic classes. Howard, let's go in alphabetical order. You go first by first name.
Okay, sure. Hi. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Howard Chang. I'm the Dean of Students. I've been in administration for about 7 years. So I was also a classroom teacher for several years and a department chair working in that group of academic leaders that Emily leads currently. That's within classrooms. So I have a lot of experience teaching as well as managing student life. Yeah, there are so many opportunities to learn beyond the classroom. I mean, in many ways, that's really kind of what adds a lot of contour and flavor to the upper school experience. I'll just start with clubs because it's really exemplary of what the culture is like in the upper school. Currently this year, sort of our first rebound year from last year, which was so different and irregular. We have 60 clubs right now. We have 60 clubs. Some are more active than others, but all of them are registered. They're confirmed. They have plans. They have sponsors. They have an obligation to do events and hold meetings. So we have 60 clubs that covers a wide range of different topics, interests, some academics, some service, some dealing with culture and affinity, some dealing with political interests, so forth and so on. So lots of different things. I'll just read a couple of examples just to give you a taste. We have a club brand new this year called the Translation Club. And this was a club originated by some of our international students who, when you think about design thinking, one of the critical elements is an empathy piece, right? Emily mentioned the rapid fire iterations and the redesign and testing and continuing to evolve a product, right, until you solve the problem. But one of the critical pieces that's part of that whole process is the empathy part, and interviewing and understanding and really getting into the skin of the person who is articulating the challenge or the idea. And so these students, recognize the fact that so many of our international families need a little bit of extra boost in terms of navigating all the voluminous materials and rich materials available on our website and all of our literature. So they have an interest in giving service opportunities to students who bring different language skills, because we have such a rich diversity of students in our community, to help translate materials, whether that's Coursera courses online to help make those more accessible to students around the world, or also even some of the Flint Hill materials themselves. So that's a brand new club that was wholly student generated and came from student from student ideation, really. And so that's really one of the hallmarks of our community, that these kinds of clubs, sometimes niche, sometimes very specific, can really arise from a grassroots level. We have another club called Magic of Language. This is from a student who takes Latin, happens to also speak Mandarin Chinese, and I think has interest in other languages. And he just loves the idea of drawing connections between words in different languages. Some of them are obviously related. Latin, which is what I taught, is of course a mother tongue behind Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, etc., and French. But he also wants to connect across languages that are not etymologically related, because it's just an area of intellectual interest. We have some things that are going to be more familiar to people, such as Literary Magazine and the school and the student newspaper, Model UN, Debate Club, so forth and so on. So those, of course, also help our students expand their interests and build their skills. So clubs is just a really rich area. And what's really powerful about it is that it is so much student driven and student directed. I mentioned 60 clubs this year. Other years we've had 40, 50, whatever. And what's really powerful is that you take a snapshot of our student life through the clubs registered in a given year. Some you'll see every year. These are carryovers. These are really, institutionally supported clubs. And then there are other clubs that exist in one snapshot that don't exist in another. And it reflects the fact that our clubs evolve as our student interests evolve and different people flow in and out of our community. So I'll pause right there just so I can share some airtime with my colleague, Dr. Odell. But there's a lot to say on this topic, and I'm happy to circle back after she's had a chance to share some remarks.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Odell, and I am the Assistant Head of School for Signature and Special Programs. And I can't think of much at Flint Hill that happens outside of the classroom that isn't driven by student curiosity. One of the great benefits, I think, of our program across the board is that students have an opportunity to try on different things, to try out different things, and see what they love. Sports, for instance, our students can, in middle school, all of our students do some sort of athletics, and we host that during the school day so that every student gets a chance to explore and experience what it might be like to play a different sport. And you can pick something different every season. And so you just get to try out a lot of different things and see where your curiosity leads you there. We have some really amazing summer opportunities and spring break opportunities. COVID has put a little bit of a damper on those, but we are starting to talk about what those will look like next year. But student travel opportunities for students to explore places and ideas that they're curious about. One of my favorite summer activities that students have the opportunity to do is to serve with Habitat for Humanity. So to go out and to be curious of what it is like to help others and to work in something that most of them don't really have much experience with. Our arts are really similar to athletics in that there are so many different opportunities to try out different ways to explore the arts. And if one sticks, then you have more opportunity to dive in and really develop that curiosity. And if one doesn't necessarily stick, then the next semester, you can try something different. And so one of the things that I love most about Flint Hill is that we want students to take chances and to try new things and to experience what it's like to try something new and to be on that learning journey with others who may or may not be in the same place, and to learn from each other. So I think that we have so many opportunities. And before I turn it back to Meredith, I do want to mention that we've talked a lot about what's available in the upper or the middle school, but one of my favorite things that we have in the lower school are brown bag lunches. And so brown bag lunches are an opportunity where many different people from the community who have different roles in life and different jobs and different interests come in and speak with our lower school students. And lower school students can choose whether they want to participate in a brown bag lunch or not. And so they are getting then to say like, wow, that really is cool and that's interesting. And I want to go eat lunch and explore what this person has to teach me. And so I think that, across the board, we're just giving students a lot of choice, which allows them to experience and explore curiosity.
Dr. Adele Meredith, do you mind if I hog the mic back for 1 second?
You'll all get to know. Howard asked that in the form of a question, but the answer is yes. You go right ahead, Howard.
No, thanks. There's one more thing I wanted to throw in there that is really integral to our curriculum insofar as it's a graduation requirement and is literally an extension of learning in an experiential fashion beyond the classroom. And that's our capstone senior project. So what happens is right around AP exams, our seniors wrap up their traditional curricula and they have their sort of final summative assessments, et cetera. So they bring their classes to closure. And then for the 2 weeks during which AP exams are administered, they are attending classes related to their AP exam and they take their exam and they do well, et cetera, and all that. As their exams are checked off and they bring each class to close, they begin to ramp up and they begin to do hours towards their senior capstone project. And this is one of those areas that really connects to a lot of the themes that have come up before, because this is wholly student driven. It's obviously going to be reflective of student choice because we live in such a rich and resource rich area. Our students tend to have a really great array of choices, both through their connections and the good old fashioned phone book and Google. In terms of where they do their projects. They do things that range from glamorous, like working, in Capitol Hill or, working for big tech companies or Fortune 500 companies to very sort of purpose-driven towards a known career, getting time in a doctor's office, or getting time in a lawyer's office or with a commercial real estate company, to doing things that are just very different or maybe non-traditional because it's either an area of passion or it's something that they want to do that they feel like maybe they'll never get to do again. So this is the time to do it. For example, working animal therapy, working in a vet's office, working in a music store, working, what's the other one I was thinking of? Oh, working in a bakery, for example, or in the kitchen of a restaurant. So a lot of really wide-ranging experiences that really teach our kids so many lessons, both in terms of extending their academics in many cases into the real world, and then also in terms of seeing how the academic journey they've taken and the sort of unwritten, uncurricular lessons of experiencing the Flint Hill experience have also prepared them for learning new challenges, adapting new routines, finding new comfort zones, establishing new relationships in a new context, such as the working world as they complete these projects. So that's just something I think that's really important to mention because it is really sort of a highlight of the senior year. And it's great because you see in such a rapid, punctuated period of time, the growth our seniors go through and demonstrate just by getting out there and navigating, bringing their own lunch in the metro system and traffic and hours and all that sort of stuff and reflecting on that. And then at the end of all that, presenting to a faculty panel their project so that they can demonstrate this area of growth and this area of independence that they've achieved as part of their graduation requirements. So I think that's just really important to mention.
Thank you, Howard. That was terrific. In your comments, you mentioned something that was integral, and I want to, although I'm not going to mention them by name, although if we're all taking a meaningful risk, maybe parents would join us in that regard too. But this parent, I noted, led with, I thought, a really interesting observation in their question. They wrote, it seems like innovation and allowing the child to lead is an integral part of the program. And Jessica and Emily, I wondered if you could talk about the curriculum and our social emotional learning development. And specifically, I'm guessing this is a lower school parent because we were asked to share some examples in the lower school where children's interests have had an impact on the curriculum itself. And Jessica, since we haven't yet heard from you, I'm going to mess up my alphabetical order and switch it up. And let's start with you first.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Craig, and I teach kindergarten in the lower school. I'm so excited to be with you all this evening and discuss all of these really exciting questions. One of the best parts about teaching kindergarten is we are asking questions all day long, and the questioning really never stops. I love the curiosity of the young students that I get to work with. I also especially love the fact that they are already such conscientious citizens and they have great ideas. And if we give them the space to really develop that agency, they are such capable individuals and they are really able to make an impact and have a voice at a very young age. I loved the part of this question that asked about the social emotional learning and how that impacts student voice and choice, and also our curriculum and what that looks like as leading as an individual. I think most importantly, starting in the lower school and all the way through Flint Hill, we really value the students as an individual. And as faculty and administrators, it is extremely important to us to get to know our students and make sure that they feel seen and known and safe. If they can have that in our school, then we know that we can meet them where they are and help them learn their best. And so that's number one. And that's always the first thing when they come in the door in the morning, that we're happy you're here. How are you doing? What's going on with you? And once they've really been able to establish that feeling of being seen as an individual, we're able to celebrate one another as individuals in the classroom and really develop a community. And our community looks a little different in each classroom every year because we're a unique makeup of individuals. And we really grow that together and cultivate that as a class. So what that means is as we're getting to know one another, we're starting to see what makes our students excited, what makes them tick, what gets them really interested and curious, what kinds of questions are they asking, what prior knowledge do they have? And we're really giving them a lot of space to speak up and share their own ideas. So as teachers, we a lot of time take a back seat and allow them to really have the floor and to speak. This is not a place where I'm talking at you and I'm here to teach you, but we're here to learn together. And I think it's really important to have those moments of letting our students share and respond to one another and ask each other questions, because that's really where some of our best learning takes place. I can think of an example from a few years ago, and I have lots of stories about my classes over the years, but one that really stands out to me and is very close to my heart, a class of kindergartners just a few years ago. We were studying patterns. It was our, typical kind of math unit for that particular time of year. And we were exploring it in lots of different ways. This group loved art, so looking at you, James, but they really were extremely interested in hands-on explorations, looking at visual art, creating their own interpretations of that art. And one of the invitations that my co-teacher and I set up was a weaving invitation with yarn to kind of work their fine motor skills, but also let them explore patterns and see what they noticed. Around the same time, we had read a story, and the story was called Extra Yarn, if you ever cared to look it up. But we also happened to take a field trip around that same time. And while we were driving on the bus to our destination, the students actually noticed someone who was homeless in DC while we were driving. And they asked the question, well, why is that person there? And how are they going to stay warm? Who's going to take care of them? So we got back to school, and the conversation kind of kept going, and they really had a lot of ideas. And a student said, well, we know how to weave. We could make some scarves. And actually, we turned it into a very long-term project that continued throughout a large portion of the year, but we ended up partnering with the Lamb Center in Fairfax County. Students wrote letters asking what would be helpful, how can we help, how can we deliver these to visitors to the Lamb Center who come in for a hot meal and for a place to stay warm during the day. We ended up actually creating and weaving by hand, I think it was 50 scarves, and hand delivering them to the Lamb Center. We were able to deliver cards for the people that visit there. And the woman who runs the Lamb Center was actually able to give our students a tour and talk to them a little bit more about how they help the people in Fairfax County who are in need of different services, how they're able to get medical care and things like that. So it was really a tremendous example of our students and their empathy connecting back to what they were already learning in the classroom and how they could take that and really act as citizens who are taking action and making the world a better place.
That's terrific. Thank you, Jessica. And I think if we swing from kindergarten now sort of back to upper school, I've got a curriculum question headed your way, Howard and Emily. And this parent is clearly curious because they've already done the deep dive into the program guide for the upper school. Very impressive. I know. I mean, with glee, I see the two of you happy about this. But they very astutely noted that we have a wide range of AP classes, as well as Flint Hill designed honors courses. And so one of the things they were curious about is, it appears as if many of our students sort of, at least how we presented in the program guide, it appears as if many sort of get on an AP track. And yet they notice the descriptions for the topics designed by Flint Hill look maybe more interesting. I don't want to put words in the person's mouth, but by the comment, it looked like maybe they thought our courses potentially were more interesting. But from a college perspective, how is it viewed to select AP versus the Flint Hill honors classes? And how do we support students' curiosity, all while knowing that, of course, all of them will engage in the college search process as well? So if each of you could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Emily, would you like to go?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, kind of as a big picture. And, you know, at one of my slides, I think my last slide was about curating the journey, right? And we have so much, one of the benefits of being part of the Flint Hill community is sort of our deep understanding of working with colleges, our relationships with colleges, and how we can help curate that journey for students to know what they need as a part of like the next process for college and work life beyond. And also knowing the importance of balance for our students. So that idea of balance is a really key part of our academic advising program, so that we can help students decide where they want to stretch themselves with the honors and AP programs that our curriculum is rich in those offerings. And then where are some of their passions where they might want to dive a little deeper? And if there's not an AP there, how might you be able to extend your own learning through an independent study? Or can you take that risk and try out one of these highly collaborative classes in innovation where you have to work as a team and you develop all those sort of soft skills, which is a kind of a skill set that's very different from what an AP curriculum would be able to offer to you. Another element I would just tease out is that while our course descriptions, you know, match the College Board AP course description, our teachers bring a great mix of those traditional performance expectations for AP, as well as a rich knowledge of how to design instruction and projects so that students can experience a lot of the project-based learning even in an AP traditional curriculum. So those classes, while rooted in the AP College Board, and certainly all of our students take the AP test as a requirement of the class, you'll find that the teachers are really interested in deep learning in that topic. And then going back to that neuroscience that I talked about, it's lots of different ways that you can activate the deep learning, even to perform on a standard College Board kind of assessment. So That's kind of a high level, and I'll turn it over to Howard.
Well, thank you, Emily. One of the first things I'll note is that every single course in Flint Hill is a college preparatory course. There is no such thing as a weak course in our curriculum, or an easy gimme, gut class. That doesn't exist in our school. You pay too much money for that, and our teachers care too much for that, and our curriculum is too strong, and our experience too dynamic, and challenging, and interactive and engaging for that. So, as opposed to, a public Fairfax County school, our AP enrollment is managed carefully because of that balance piece, because we do not believe, particularly because of the rigor of all of our courses, including the AP, but also including our honors and regular courses. We don't believe most kids are going to be their most successful jamming into these 7 possible classes, 7 APs across the board. So we really do emphasize, when students get recommended sometimes for 5, 6, 7 APs, that do lean into areas of strength, and that they produce a well-mixed, well-balanced curriculum that really addresses all the key areas. So when kids, for example, choose not to take AP English because they particularly want to invest that sort of AP time in terms of homework and academic work product expectations in, say, science or math, for example, they have the opportunity junior and senior year to take English seminars. And so on paper, this is basically slotting in English 3 or English 4 in your junior and senior year. But the rich part about that is, particularly in that area, we've developed a course that, rather than just one uniform survey course across the entire grade, we have topic-specific seminars that allow a really rich array of author or genre concentration that really brings almost like a college level of choice in that area. So there's really no going wrong here, right? Because in some areas, if you want to go AP because that's where you want to get potentially college credit or whatever it is to advance your ability to register early for classes as a freshman, or cut down your tuition because you've satisfied these hours and the college accepts that, that's fine. You do that, and you do that in those areas that best suit your academic profile. But then you choose to go regular honors in the other areas, and you're going to have a great array of experiences there, knowing that all the courses are college preparatory. And whether it's a Flint Hill design course or a college board certified, verified AP class, our teachers bring life to those courses. The teaching styles, the ability to engage and to differentiate and to build off of relationship-based teaching really brings a lot of life to the classroom. And so whatever they end up doing, they usually end up doing well by themselves, as long as they strike the appropriate balance. Usually when we see students have a hard time is when they've really kind of gluttonized themselves on the academic offering. So that's the one risk and one temptation, because we all look at those course offerings, we think, wow, this is great. I wish I had high school like this. And so I get that. But we do want to add a note of judicious selection as you go through the curriculum.
That's terrific. Thank you both. Vicki, as I ask this next question, there's a really specific and good question in the chat about lower school and innovation. So why don't you go ahead in the chat and answer that? That way we meet that need. But we had a number of parents ask a shared but very kind of nitty-gritty question. So I want to make sure we answer this because it was a popular one. Could we talk about what's a typical day in the life of a student? So how do they start their day? What's the day look like? And what I'm thinking is, Michelle, why don't you cover lower school? Emily, you cover middle school. Howard, you cover upper school. And let's go lower, middle, upper, just to go through the age progression. Thanks.
So you'd like me to address the STEM question? All right, absolutely.
Vicki, what I was hoping you could do is type in the chat the answer. And while you're doing that, so that way we meet that question, then we'll at the same time answer this larger question that a number of people had. Thanks.
So day in the life at lower school. Wow, what a great day in the life. I live next door to second grade, and I mostly want to be a second grader. I think that the day starts off amazingly for all of our students because they are greeted with teachers and administrators helping them get out of the car every morning, flipping the dog, an occasional treat, and escorting them into the building if they're some of the youngest students. In every class, the day starts with a morning meeting, so that students have a chance to engage with each other, to be really authentic, to check in, like Jessica talked about. And then the teachers have this amazing structure to their classes, which also allows for students to be incredibly curious. And so while the teachers are focused on teaching very specific skills, the topics and the interests that they're using to teach those skills are often driven by student curiosity. Students not only engage in what you typically think of, like math and reading and writing and language arts, but with science and social studies and physical education and the arts and music, and plenty of play outside, and social time. And so I never actually talk to a student during the day who is not excited about something that's going on in the classroom. So once upon a time, I lived next door to fourth grade, which was very exciting. They did a fabulous study of Shakespeare, and it was just like my dream week to be next door to fourth graders during Shakespeare. It's very rich, very exciting. And I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea. Every class, the order of the day sometimes changes, but the inspiration for their curiosity and their collaboration is there throughout the day.
Okay, and I think I pick it up for middle school. Is that right? And so middle school starts, we get more sort of welcoming at carpool, and our 7th and 8th graders filter into the building, and they have some flexibility in those project spaces, waiting outside those areas. Middle school is very much about the social aspects and being able to develop great relationships with your peers. You might be popping in to see your advisor or your teacher. A really important part of our program and a foundation for our social emotional learning is the meetings. They're called Circle of Power and Respect. It's connected with a social emotional program called Developmental Designs that we've been doing for about 9 years now. And it's a great experience where there's no technology. Students are sitting in a circle, looking at each other. They have a greeting every morning. So like making that eye contact, calling people by name, learning each other's names, really making sure that they feel known in the morning. And then they play this fun little game, and there are all sorts of like these fun kind of active games to get kids kind of warmed up for the morning. And middle schoolers, their day, the schedule does rotate, so you don't have the same collection of classes every day, but you have your core academics, your math and science, your history, your English, your foreign language, and then there's a whole host of so many electives. And fine arts is a requirement every year in 7th and 8th grade, so that's also a core class. And then there are all of these wonderful electives. You might take a second language. You might take multiple innovation classes. And so that's kind of the bulk of your day. We have really wonderful programming throughout the week during the day, so that students have advisory study halls where they can learn to go and check in with their teacher during our kind of office hours to get that little extra, I wasn't sure how to do this math problem, or can you help me come up with my thesis? So just those little moments of building relationships with teachers, learning self-advocacy, learning some organizational and study skills strategies kind of embedded through the day. There's plenty of time for our 7th and 8th graders to get outside and exercise and play in our playground, because we do, that play and joyful exploration and just the being outside and moving around is integral for a healthy learning community. And then we have at the end of every day our athletics period. And so all of our middle school students engage in athletics each season. And it happens during the school day. And so they can practice, and their games are sort of in that time frame, and then carpool to wrap it up at the end. On to Howard.
All right. Well, I immediately thought of a kid that I interacted with today that I work with in a club. So I'm just going to, without naming the kid, just kind of empathy exercise, walk through that kid's day today, just to give you a taste of what her day was like. So today, this is a junior. Today I came to school probably about 7:45. I hung out in the commons, talked to some friends as more and more people trickled in, and the energy of the building started to build. And with it, the buzz. We're 3 days from break. Everyone's kind of tired, but there's a lot of energy in the air, crackling. College acceptances are rippling through the senior class. I've got older friends, blah, blah, blah. At 8:10, I go to my advisory. And this being my junior year, this is a group of people I've gotten used to because I've been with them all throughout last year, both online and in person. And this year, of course, so happy to be back in person and spend time with them. I like my advisor. I've got a couple of close friends, and we chat a little bit before we do like a really quick check-in with the advisor on a little bit of topic, and then she has a couple of announcements for us. 8:25, I walk over to AP US History. My teacher, Ms. Anderson, is a really dynamic instructor, someone who really pushes us to think critically as we interact with material in classes, someone who's never content to just deliver, but always ask and draw forth from us. So I love this class because I'm very historically interested and very politically aware, and just someone who really likes to be active and keep up with current events. So this is probably my favorite class, certainly of this morning, but I'm a really avid student, so all my classes are pretty fun. At 9:25, I hop over to Spanish for Honors. I decided not to go into AP this particular year because I was already in AP US History, which is definitely one of the tough classes as far as, boy, there's a lot of content and academic skills, particularly writing there. So I wanted to do Spanish 4 honors this year, and I'll look at AP at the end of the year. But I have an awesome teacher. She's super experienced, Miss Piazza. Obviously, I've gotten better and better at speaking, and I've gotten more and more comfortable at listening too. So today's lesson went pretty well, but I'll probably check back with her in office hours because something she said went by a little fast at the end. I didn't think I caught it. At 10:30, we have break. So I've got about half an hour. At this point, I'm checking on my emails. I respond to an email from Mr. Chang that I saw related to our club meeting coming up. I check in with some people about yearbook because we're not meeting today during open lunch period, even though we normally do. So I'm just verifying what we're going to be doing and what the options are for people. And then I talk to a couple of friends, use the restroom, freshen up, have a quick snack, and boom, right back at it. At 11 o'clock, I'm in Intro to Economics, and this class is actually more interesting than I expected because Mr. Page, the new upper school director, is amazing. I had no idea he was that funny. He's the principal of our school, but he's really nice too, and he's just really easy to talk to, and I can see why he's been chosen to be the leader of our division. So I'm really enjoying this. Learning about opportunity cost, what a really fundamental, useful concept, and not to mention, of course, the basics of supply and demand and that sort, and utility, the concept of utility. Now at noon, I'm hungry. I'm going to grab myself a quick lunch and then run back into the Learning Commons, which has been blocked off for club meetings because one of the clubs I'm the leader of, the Asian Student Union, is having one of our meetings. And we have a great agenda. We have a little bit of a mix and mingle at the beginning, and then my friend, Anna, is going to be introducing her migration story because we've been doing this in this club where we present the stories of our families, our grandparents or our parents who were the ones who came to this country as a way of introducing ourselves and sharing some of our experiences and heritages in this club. It goes really well. The story is fascinating. It literally involves Idi Amin in Uganda. So there's a lot of history woven in too. This was a great one. And then Mr. Chang made some announcements about some things coming up about trips and Lunar New Year presentations that we'll be doing. So I'm actually kind of pumped. When that's over, I run back for the last class of the day. I'm really tired, but this is one of my tough ones. This is actually a post-AP class, multivariable calculus. So I already did AP Calc last year. I'm in one of the top groups in math, and so I've got to be on my toes to keep up with this group. Class goes pretty well. Whew, it's over. I'm really tired, 2:40, but I'm going to run quickly back to see Miss Piazza for office hours before I hit the 3:30 bus to go home. What a day. And I'll be in bed by 9 o'clock. That's not a lie. This kid is an early sleeper.
That's terrific, Howard. And I don't know about everybody else, but I thought I had a productive day, and this upper schooler certainly put me to shame. But
Their free period is period 1, which is on the other day. So this was my busiest day of the week.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better, Howard, trying to keep up with a 16-year-old. But before we turn it back over to Jennifer for some sort of just follow up and next steps, I want to ask Emily the last question. A parent asked what I thought was just such an interesting, and we've touched on it, but I know, Emily, this is a topic you particularly enjoy. All of us do, but you know, if we were ranking passion, you might out-passion some of us on it, which is how do we integrate the core values? And we talk a lot about the core values. We all know the core values and live by them, but how do we see those show up in our culture? If you could talk a little bit about that, and then we'll turn it back over to Jennifer.
You know, this is something that the core values that, you know, sometimes in independent schools, they're just sort of words that are on the websites and things like that. And I'm really constantly impressed by how my colleagues and how students bring these forth. You know, you see people sometimes with the little printout about what they are taped to their MacBook. Like I saw that with one of my department chairs, just as that reminder of this thing that anchors us and grounds us. You know, things that we've done in different years, sort of different iterations of this, is when we choose summer reading, sometimes it's connected to one of the themes. In some years, we've had a core book where in different divisions, sometimes you can find this where one book, the author will create sort of a younger age, like a picture book kind of connected to it. And we can all explore sort of this theme around lead and support with compassion, or respect and value all equally. So that's kind of a big picture meta version of it. But then you see it in moments where, in talking about some historical situation or some current events in social studies. I started out as a history teacher, so I sort of always go back to the humanities for these things. But it's not just in the humanities. That's one of the things that's really vibrant about the Flint Hill community, is the way that math teachers and science teachers also bring this idea of diversity of perspective, for instance, in mathematics, right? And how that ties to respect and value all equally and building those inclusive communities. So this is something that really just sort of shows up in all of the curriculum, from the books that we might work on to Jessica's great example with those kindergartners around sort of their awareness of other people and their experiences, and how can they lead and support, what can they do to make the world a better place. So it's really just sort of integrated in all these great stories.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Emily. And I want to thank all the panelists. You all were, I love that you let me put you on the spot. I want to tell you, parents, wow, you could help write curricula because you are so good at asking great questions. And there were only 6 pages worth of questions we didn't get to. So I'm certain there were questions we did not answer. Jennifer will help with that in just a moment. But thank you all for taking a meaningful risk and jumping right into it and asking great questions. It's been wonderful to be with you all. And thanks, my colleagues. Really appreciate your great help.
Yes, thank you to all of the panelists. And Meredith, thank you for leading us through this journey of curious questions at this event. And we do want this journey to continue, because curiosity certainly doesn't stop at Flint Hill, and we don't want it to stop with you either. So we will, we have all of your questions and we have your email addresses. And so we are going to follow up with you in the coming weeks. So if we didn't get to your question, please know that one of our team members will be in contact, because we want to have the curious conversations. And more importantly, we want to answer your questions. So we'll be following up with you soon. In terms of other next steps to really continue your curious journey, you'll either start or finish the application. I know a lot of you have already applied, so you'll receive your missing items update tomorrow. For you, those of you that haven't applied, there's the steps for applying on our website and a link to the application on the website as well. I know a lot of you have also been to one of our information sessions, but for those of you that have not yet been to an information session, we we do have them by division. We have 3 virtual ones, 1 for each division in January. So you can register for them now on our website. On January 25th, we're hosting a parent-to-parent event. So if you just want to pop into a virtual meeting and talk with some of our parents, you can register to do that on January 25th. And otherwise, our team members will be in touch. You can also schedule virtual meetings, phone calls with us by clicking on links on the admission team website. We are also open for campus tours. So if you haven't stepped foot on our campus, certainly invite you to schedule a campus tour and to do that. And as a final reminder, the deadline for admission is January 21st. So if you haven't quite started, that's all right. Our team is here to help. The first step is completing the 15-minute application form, and then our team will be with you, making sure you don't miss any of those other steps once we have that piece. So with that, we will go ahead and close the event. Thank you again for all of your incredibly thoughtful questions. We were truly blown away and had so much fun reading them and really looking forward to continuing to dive into them. So thank you for spending your evening with us. Thank you for your curiosity, and we'll look forward to continuing these conversations beyond this evening. Have a great night.